everyone. Welcome to this series, Understanding People, brought to you by Get Abstract. My name is Kirsten, and I am your host for this series, and I want to welcome all of you back. We have a really great episode today, and before I introduce our guest, who is just over there on the other side of the screen, I just want to tell you a little bit about what we have been exploring in this series. So season one, we're talking all about how to understand ourselves well and understand others that we work with, both in the office and in our personal lives. In season two, we're looking at how to understand others in the context of all of the changes that this year has brought, as well as learning how to turn the challenges that we're facing, whether it's with ourselves, with others in the office, at home, in our social circle, in our family, how to turn those challenges into opportunities for growth. Today, we're going to talk about how to manage your reputation. So instead of just talking about how to understand ourselves or others, we're talking about how to align how we think we're coming across with how other people perceive us. Which, trying to how to manage that gap sometimes between perception and reality. And to help us explore that, I've brought in Sara Canaday. She is an author and a speaker, and has written a book that's in our Get Abstract library called You According to Them. And I see it actually on the bookshelf right behind you there, Sara. And before we dive in, I just want to read you a little bit about Sara so you can get to know her. So she's a speaker and an author, obviously, and an executive coach who helps arm professionals with the strategies and practices that they need to succeed in today's complex and competitive business climate. She partners often with Fortune 500 companies committed to helping their employees strengthen their leadership skills and improve business relationships, and of course, enhance performance. When she is not speaking or working with her clients, she's cheering on her son's football team, hiding new shoe purchases from her husband and 16-year-old daughter. I love that one. And ordering ordering double cappuccinos at Starbucks. All right. So please join me in welcoming Sara to the show. Sara, great to have you here.
Great to be here. Thank you.
And where are you joining us from? Are you in Austin?
I am in Austin, Texas. Yes. Cool. It probably will be about 80 degrees today.
Oh, lucky you.
Yes, of course. Quite the contrast from 3 weeks ago when we made the news, right? We were on the map for a very unprecedented freeze. So we're grateful for today's weather.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it is spring, and all over the world it's different, but I know coming from the United States, spring for us in Michigan growing up was not 80 degrees. So I'm very happy for you. So you wrote the book literally on how to manage reputation. And first of all, why is reputation so important? And I'd like to add a little addendum to that, in that, is it always necessary that a good reputation is important? Because I think of someone like Steve Jobs, who had this reputation for being, a stickler and a really hard manager and a really tough boss, perfectionistic reputation for some not very good things, but he was a very successful leader. So how important is reputation, and what kind of reputation?
Yeah. So I think, we're talking professional reputation here. I mean, obviously personal is important too, but I think today's focus is going to be on your, reputation at work. And I like to focus on not only professional, but leadership reputation, because I think that's really important. And, here's why I wrote the book, is because I spent 14 years in the corporate world. And I'm an observer by nature, right? I would observe people and I would just marvel at how people that were just so sharp could come up with solutions, could deliver work in, record time. They were being held back in their careers because they had these blind spots, these nuances that nobody was willing to talk to them about, right? Behind closed doors, there would be discussion of, he or she is good, but I wouldn't send them to that conference on our behalf because, they're kind of a loose cannon. We don't know what they're going to say. Or, this person is great at what they do, but would not make a great leader because they're overly abrupt and direct. Whatever the case may be, I think that's why reputation is critical. For leaders, your reputation really sets the stage for whether your team is going to support you give you discretionary effort, go above and beyond, whether they're going to trust in your decision making and have confidence in you. So there's just a whole number of things. And to your second point, does it have to be a good reputation? Well, I think good is in the eye of the beholder, right? So that in and of itself, we'd have to kind of unpack, because good can mean different things to different people. But what's interesting is I often have people bring up Steve Jobs as an example of somebody who was known as somebody that, a leader that was just abrupt and abrasive. And my response to that is he was the exception, not the rule. That's number one, right? I think very few people make it to that level and that success with that type of reputation. But the other thing I would challenge people to think about is how much more successful could he have been if he worked on those things that impacted his reputation.
Yeah, that is a really excellent point. And I wonder too, does it also have to do something with knowing what you're going to get from someone? At least if someone, there's a very clear, all right, this, at least what to expect from this person consistently, that offer, that's maybe better than you never know what you're going to get from someone or a leader.
Oh yeah. I always tell people, in fact, I think I wrote an article about this, it was a blog post, and I mentioned that very thing. You never want to be the kind of person where your colleagues and your followers are walking in that day saying, who am I going to get today? Bob A or Bob B, right? That to me is just one of the hardest things for people to deal with and to work around, is not knowing, who they're going to get in any given moment.
Yeah, absolutely. So you have a great quote in your book, and you say that to unlock career opportunities, you need to identify and repair mismatches between how you perceive yourself and how people perceive you, except that you may need to change your behavior or eat some humble pie. How does someone even begin that process?
Yeah. And if you will allow me to, I can tell you where that thinking came from. I experienced it myself, really. So I would say early in my supervisory type career, right? I was probably a frontline leader, but I remember I had an opportunity to interview for a mid-level position, right? A mid-manager, was an assistant vice president. And this particular role required that I co-lead a department with another leader, an existing leader. And long story short, one of the first week or two of that job, we were given a pretty stressful assignment, and that was reducing budgets, which meant some reduction in force. So we spent a lot of time together. We had some long hours. And one of the nights that we were together, we were in my colleague's office. And I remember I made some, really punchy joke, right? And it really doesn't matter what the joke is. The point is that her eyes got really big and she started laughing. And I remember thinking, okay, that's kind of not a correlated response. And then she looked at me and she said, "Oh my gosh, Sara, you actually have a sense of humor." I knew right then and there I was about to hear maybe something difficult. And she must have been comfortable, because she went on and she said, "Yeah, I'm not even sure I wanted to work with you. I didn't know what it was going to be like." And that was hard to hear, but it was very eye-opening, right? I mean, and what was interesting is this idea of making sure your intent matches your impact related to me. Because if you were to ask me what was going on at the time, I was determined as a young leader to be taken seriously. And so I tended to walk the halls very seriously. I was always very focused. And when I went to meetings, there was very little chit chat, because I thought, oh gosh, we don't do that around here. Now, granted, I've been out of corporate for 13 years and I did work for a very classic, it was the insurance industry. It's about as traditional as banking, right?
Yeah.
So everything had its place. But nevertheless, the transfer of my behavior and my demeanor was, wow, she takes herself awfully seriously,
Uh,
right?
yeah.
So again, my point is that there are a lot of well-meaning, well-intentioned professionals who are really just trying to get it right. And they're working really hard, but there's these subtle blind spots that are keeping them from being seen as they desire or being seen in a way that helps get them seen and promoted,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, absolutely. And let's walk through some of those blind spots. And I have them, and I'll read some of them. There are many that you mentioned in the book, so we don't have time to go through each one of them. But I
Sure.
encourage people to go on. Sarah's book is in the Get Abstract library. You, according to them, obviously, then buy the book, read it yourself, share it with your colleagues. I'll walk through some of them, and then maybe you can tell us what are some of the most common in the
Okay.
coaching and work that you've
Sure.
done. There are ones like the don't fence me in maverick who doesn't last in any job. There's the intellectual snob, competent and smart, but annoys people. The frozen compass leaders who stick with what's always worked. The dust in my wind, kind of super productive leader, no crying in baseball, safety patrol. Maybe some of you are saying, oh, that's me. People with faulty volume control, the passion pistol, the perpetual doer. So which one of those do maybe you relate to the most from the anecdote you just shared, and or is the most common that you see as far as the blind spots go?
It's by all accounts, it's got to be the perpetual doer syndrome, right? I
Mm,
see it all the time. And that's because, I'm fortunate. I get to work with and speak to a lot of high potential leaders, right? These are the people that are doers. They are by nature, they are, they have a bias for action. And that has served them well all of their life, right? They're the people that are uber organized. They are the people that others go to get the job done. But inevitably, what happens sometimes is those are the same people that tend to potentially languish in their position a little longer than their counterparts, and they cannot figure it out. They think they're doing
mm.
all the right things. And so
Yeah.
the blind spot for them is this, and by the way, this is the one I relate to as well.
Mm,
It is this idea that you're so head down, so focused in getting stuff done that a couple of things happen. The first is that others feel like you care more about results than you do relationships.
mm,
The second thing that can happen is that you care more about your own advancement than you care about how your work impacts others, right?
yeah.
And then the third that I see happen so often is that you use so much of your time in being a doer that you lose the opportunity to be a thinker, right? And in today's
Mm,
world, we have to have not only a bias for action, but a bias for thought. So you never slow down enough to think long term. So you stay in the tactical, and people don't see you as somebody who's able to think strategically, who's able to think with a wider angled lens, who does make decisions that really impact more than just your own deliverables and your own success, if you will.
yeah.
So there are so many ramifications of what is seemingly a good trait. And that's those are the blind spots that I like to focus on, the ones that aren't obvious, right? They're not, an in your face blind spot. They're actually more subtle.
Yeah.
Um, and that one's the big one, the one I relate to, and the one that people struggle with.
Yeah. And it seems like with so many of them, as I was reading through them, and I really encourage people to do that self-examination and read through these different blind spots and see. But it seems like so many of them are things which, upon self-examination, you might say, Well, that's one of my best qualities. How could that be contributing to me maybe not having the best reputation and therefore getting ahead? Like the passion pistol one, I related with that one immediately because former artist and dancer, have worked in news and things and so and mental health. And so, I get really passionate about causes, and you forget that sometimes maybe other people are not as passionate, or and you say, but no, but my passion, my zeal, my advocacy is a real important trait, but it's really about shifting the way that these things are expressed, rather, so they can be good things, but it's helping shift the way that they're expressed. Is that kind of the game here?
Yeah, absolutely. And as my dear friend always says, it's somewhere in the middle. He always says that, Sarah, it's somewhere in the middle. And I
Mm,
think for leaders, especially, we have a tall order because people expect us to be two different things, right?
mm,
They want us to be passionate, right, and inspiring, but at the same time, they want us to be very calm and composed, right?
yeah,
And they want
consistent.
us to be, decisive on the one hand, but they want us to be extremely fair minded and seek out stakeholder input, right? And so, it's funny that you mentioned passion pistol syndrome, because that's the exact one I was thinking of, where you think it's good, right? And as you move up the career ladder, you probably read the story about my colleague, a friend of mine, who, she was passionate about protecting her team. That
Mhm.
was her thing, and and she was she was a senior level leader, or soon to be one. If I remember in the story, she was grooming to be a senior level leader. And that is something that was hesitant about her colleagues, is at some point she needed to make the transition, right? And to be able to
Yeah.
see things from the executive level decision and sort of temper her protection and her zeal when with her colleagues. So that's the one I would have highlighted for that.
Yeah, so good. So let's move on. Okay, if someone wants to say, all right, I'm going to tackle this issue, I want to focus more on improving my reputation so I can get
Yes.
ahead. How do they seek honest feedback? That is the tough thing because you might not be able to know exactly what yours might be. Who do you trust? Who do you listen to? And how do you get honest feedback and not just people patting your ego?
Yeah. So a couple of things. I always urge um, people to be really contemplative about what they want others to say about them. In other words, pick 4 adjectives. I want people to say that I am, let's say it's action oriented as one of them. That's fine. But really think through what's needed right now in your industry, in your position, and for the role you want.
Mm,
So, things like organized, confident, reliable, those are great, but really, what does it take right now? Do you need to be forward thinking? Do you need to be more innovative? Do you need to be global minded? Pick some that aren't necessarily the obvious, and then think about what you want people to say it's like to work with you. Are you somebody that's good at igniting fires in an otherwise sort of stagnant team? Are you somebody who knows how to work hard, but also plays hard with their team? Think of a few statements. And these aren't things that you write down and then pin up on your wall and never look at. The reason you put some thought around this is because then when you go to get feedback, you have specifics from which to draw, instead of
mm,
saying, "Hey, Luis, how do you think I'm doing?" Because guess what's going to happen? Exactly what you alluded to. They're going to tell you either what they think you want to hear, or frankly, it's too big. They kind of don't know what to do with that question. But if you say, "Hey, Luis, I am
mm.
working on, my leadership or personal brand, my identity, my reputation, and I'd love your help because I really want to make sure there's a match between what I intend and how others receive me.
Yeah.
So I'd like people to describe me as X, Y, and Z, and I'd like them to say that this is what it's like to work with me. Can you tell me if what I'm doing or what you experience either supports that, or is there anything I'm doing that detracts from that? So now they have something to work with, very specific, and they can give you very specific feedback, richer feedback.
Yeah, that is Sarah, that is the best prescription for soliciting feedback that I've ever heard, ever.
Great. Good. Yeah.
That is brilliant. Everyone take that and run with it? Seriously.
Yeah. And so, I think the second step is this idea of anonymity, right? And whether you're going to get really candid feedback. So, if you do this kind of thing where it's a conversation, then yes, go to trusted advisors, goes to former colleagues, former bosses, people that maybe you work with on your side hustle, because Lord knows there's a lot of us that have side hustles, right? But get kind of a 360 perspective from a rich audience. But if you want to do this anonymously, you can, it's so easy. You can do a Survey Monkey and just literally list about 30 adjectives and have them pick the top 3 that most represent you. And then list, kind of write out a few questions about, I aim to be X, Y, and Z on a scale of 1 to 10. Where am I on exhibiting this? There's ways you can do this and make it very simple and very quick, and you can send it out and get anonymous feedback.
That's great. Those are really, that's so good, because so many times when I've asked this question of people before, because feedback is so essential to our growth.
It is.
As we've discussed, but there's all these just, kind of ask people, make sure it's people you trust, but you just laid it out so explicitly. I want to thank you for doing that and encourage everyone to go back, rewind, take the little button, rewind a couple of minutes and watch that over again, because those are really great tools. Sarah, last couple questions. One is, do you have a brief anecdote of an organization or someone else that you've worked with personally where you've seen them transform kind of maybe a really negative reputation and transform it into something where they were received possibly, or they were able to get that promotion or take that next step as they wanted by transforming that brand?
Yeah. And candidly speaking, I have not necessarily worked with somebody who is, at the brink of maybe losing their job.
Yeah.
That's how bad it is. And then I've turned them around. But I have worked with a lot of people who, yes, they have some work to do. And the number one thing I tell people, if they're doing this on their own, if they don't have an executive coach or somebody to help guide them and shepherd them through this, is, you would be surprised at the graciousness that others will extend to you if you just say, hey, I recognize that over the years, I may have come across as abrupt, too direct, maybe even not a team player. And for that, I apologize. It is something I'm working on. I really have an interest in moving from, this to being somebody who really listens to people, listens to understand, is somebody who really seeks out others' perspectives. And I would love your support. And I've picked out some development targets, but I would love your support. If there's anything that you think would be of help in moving forward, and you've got to, they call this feed forward. This is Marshall Goldsmith's, infamous saying, feed forward, because it means you're not harping on, oh yeah, you do that. In fact, remember that time. That's not helpful, right? What's helpful is for them to give you advice on how to move towards that goal, not to remind you of why that goal exists. So I think the first and foremost is to just come out with it and be candid. It is one of the best things I've seen happen to people is when they're willing to be open to their colleagues and their boss about the work they're doing. And I have seen it happen. Now, when I work with somebody, or even if I work with groups, I have my own proprietary brand 360 survey, and also have a leadership brand 360 survey. So they'll take an instrument, or I'll use, a Hogan instrument if that's what their company uses, right? So you see not only in black and white how you're being rated, there's also open-ended comments that you can see if there's any patterns. And typically what you'll do is you'll work with somebody for 8 months, a year, and then you'll have them retake the 360-degree assessment, meaning go out to people again and solicit their feedback. And that's when you can see change. There's a more informal way of doing it, and I've done this with executives, where I just do informal interviews with their colleagues initially to find out what's the sense. And then 8 months to a year later, I go back and ask, what are you experiencing now? Is there a shift? Can you give me examples? And that's how I've seen that happen. But it is a process. It takes time. And let's be honest, some people, for whatever reason, they are going to be, indignant and sort of, put their foot in the ground, and, they're not willing to do the work. And if that's the case, then that's not the person for your company, if that's important to your company. And they should be entrepreneurs. Work with anybody.
That's a very positive solution.
Yes.
Sara, you are full of so much wisdom, and thank you for the great work that you're doing, and
Sure.
for the books that you've written, the wisdom you've already shared. Last question for you, and I've been asking this to each of our guests this season, and that is, what are you looking forward to in 2021? What are you optimistic about?
Oh my goodness. I'm looking forward to travel, but for personal reasons. I miss travel. That's one of the things that I'm looking forward to. And I miss traveling for work in that I miss being in the room with the very people I'm trying to impart messages to, I'm trying to support, I'm trying to hear from, right? That's what keeps me in the know, is really hearing from people day to day about their challenges. And I get to do that virtually, right? Because I am still speaking and doing workshops virtually, but there's something different about when somebody comes up to you after a speaking engagement. And that's where some of the stories are. And that's what I miss, but I'm convinced we're going to get back to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I am too. And things can only get better from here. And I think that we have all, professionally and personally, learned a lot of really great lessons that are going to change the way we work and give us more appreciation for those moments, as you mentioned.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Sara, thank you so much for joining
You
us
are
today.
so welcome. My pleasure.
Yeah. And thank all of you for watching. And of course, please go ahead, read Sara's book, You According to Them. So many good nuggets of wisdom in there for all of you. Thank you for watching this episode. We will see you back in a few weeks with another episode in our series, Understanding People, brought to you again by Get Abstract. You can check out all of our previous episodes as well on Vimeo or on our social media pages. But we look forward to seeing you back for another conversation very soon. Wishing you a wonderful day wherever you are in the world watching this, and we'll see you very soon. Ciao.
Bye-bye.